Welcome, everybody. We're going to start at 12 o'clock. So just make sure that you're able to see the PowerPoint and hear us. So thank you for joining us today as well.
Thank you, Louisa. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining with us today. This is the first in a series of webinars hosted by the Corporate Training and Workforce Development Team at the University of Calgary Continuing Education. Before we start with today's webinar, let's take a moment to acknowledge the land we gather. The University of Calgary is located in the heart of Southern Alberta. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika and Piikani and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. Okay, let's meet our facilitator for today's webinar. Most of you may already have seen her bio in the event registration page. Nadine, our leadership guru, has a master's degree in adult education. She's a certified professional coach and an experienced executive coach. She is also a pro at change management and a wizard when it comes to negotiations. She's helped a lot of leaders from companies like Nestle, RBC, Shell, and Deloitte to build amazing teams and develop strong leaders. We are truly fortunate to have Nadine with us today. Let's not waste any more time and dive into the wisdom that she has to share. Over to you, Nadine.
Okay. Thank you, Louisa. I will do my best to live up to your introduction. Welcome, everyone. We encourage use of the chat if you have questions. And what I was hoping to cover today was a little bit on the skills you need for negotiation, the steps to follow, what is your mindset and how do you build your confidence, some strategies for analysis and preparation for negotiations, and we have a short clip for you to analyze. We will look a little bit at what information you need and then hear from you. What do you think are the takeaways from today? I'm going to introduce you to some of the techniques that are used currently, but I would like, if you can, to put in the chat something you might like to learn today. We may not be able to get to it all, but it would be really helpful to know what people are looking for, and then I can hope to work that in. So feel free to put what you're hoping to get. What is a good outcome or a good takeaway from spending your hour and a bit? Confidence building. Thanks, Barb. Okay, excellent. All right. So I have a poll for you now. Just give me 1 second and I will pull it up here. And my question to you is, how much do you like negotiating? Not at all. You should see the poll now. Not at all. It's okay. I enjoy it when it goes well for me. I like negotiating. I love negotiating, or other. Maybe you don't want to say. Okay, I've seen the poll results come in. It's okay. It's okay is the winner so far. Okay, give 1 or 2 more answers to come in, and I will share the poll results with you. And just while we're waiting, I see in the chat, negotiation skills for business-to-business sales. Okay, building relationships while managing conflict or different sides in a negotiation, how to. Okay, thank you for those. All right, I'm going to end the poll here and share the results with you. So what do you notice here? There's, only a few, 6% love negotiating, 17% like it, 26% like it when it goes well for them, and the it's okay and not at all are actually in the majority there, 40, almost 50%. So why is that? Why don't we like negotiating? So put some things in the chat. Why do you think people don't like it? What do you not like about negotiating? Confidence may be one thing. I know I've seen that in the chat. Strategies on how to manage difficult stakeholders. Objections. I don't know how. The tension. Yes. Conflict. Because you might lose something. It's awkward. A great mnemonic to remember before approaching a time of negotiation. Okay. It's awkward, unpredictable. Know your end goal. Tension and stress. Lack of preparation. Misunderstanding. All of those things, yes, we experience. Being okay with the results. Yeah, there's a little bit of criticism, no matter what outcome you get from people who weren't in the room, I've noticed. Differences, unexpected temperament of other person, unreceptiveness. Yeah, so those are all the reasons we don't like negotiating. different expectations. Now, let's ask a question here. I have another poll for you. Just one second. So my question to you is, how much training have you had in negotiating? Now, remember, this one is anonymous. And let's just see what our rates are here. And then I have a follow-up question for you. So far, lots of people entering their answers. Thank you. This is great. Yeah, it's looking like a few more results coming in. Okay, so I'm just going to end the poll here. Oh, wait, we have almost 100%. Okay, I'm going to share the results. So what do you think of that? None at all. Some reading on my own. So none at all is the clear winner at 43%. And it's like 69%, almost 70% have had no formal training. Reading helps, definitely. Okay, so let me show you why I asked you that question. So how much training do you think the other side has had? Put your thoughts in the chat. How much training do you think the other side has had? I see similar or none, probably the same, very little, more than me, probably very little. You know, you'd be surprised how few people actually have training in negotiation. And so if you're doing a retail negotiation, like your house or your car, you know, it's possible the professional you're dealing with has had some training, but then again, maybe not. Sometimes the banks don't even train their lenders on negotiating. So what that means is we may automatically go in with an assumption that the other side has more training, and maybe they don't. And it's also a really worthwhile skill. I was challenged to take this course by my boss and mentor, and I was helping him with the course, actually designing it and putting it together. And he said, you know, you should give some thought to thinking about facilitating this course. And I said, oh, I'm a terrible negotiator. Why would I do that? And he said, don't you think it's a skill that could be learned, that you could get better at it? So I took the course and I found out, wow, you know, even the little things that you pick up the first time you take a training course can really help you in future negotiations. And I'm an independent consultant and I have to negotiate for everything. And it does get easier with practice and with time. So let me share with you some of the things I've learned over time in terms of dealing with negotiation. Many of us don't like negotiation because of the concept of power, that someone's going to take something away from me, or they're going to be difficult, or they're going to pull rank, or whatever is going to happen. And I would suggest that that's more of an old school definition of power. When I was doing a course in political science, I was taught that power was the ability to make someone do what he or she would not otherwise have done. And this is like a teacher can tell a student to sit down, a police officer can give a ticket. That's legitimate authority. But it's also, there's kind of a myth around negotiating that you have to be a really tough person and just kind of push everyone into agreeing. And I would argue now we know so much more about the more current view on negotiating, which is the ability to get what you need. When I say this term interests, we use it specifically in negotiation. It's the ability to get what you need out of this negotiation, or maybe the ability to leave the negotiation. So what are the sources of power? So if confidence is an issue, or you have a difficult party to deal with, check the power levels. Can you reward the other side? Maybe you can. Maybe you can offer them a good deal with some training attached. There's maybe ways you can introduce them to somebody in your network. So it's worth thinking about, do we have any ways to reward? People who can reward are people like your boss, can give you interesting projects to work on. Parents can reward children. And research has shown that reward is the most powerful form of power, because if we're getting rewarded, we want more of that. And so we stay in the arrangement. Legitimacy, that's what I mentioned earlier, is who has the legitimate authority. What is your reputation? You know, they say that your reputation is in the room, even if you're not. So a good reputation to have as a negotiator is prepared and win-win mindset, cooperative. I have something in the chat here. Depending on the environment, business, some, but not thinking win-win, but rather win for me. Yes, we're absolutely going to talk about that. Your expertise or skill, if you're a subject matter expert, that can give you power in a negotiation, but it can also be your negotiating skill. So that's something to consider. You know, if you feel like there's areas where you'd like to improve your negotiating, absolutely do more reading, get some training, hire a coach, a negotiation coach. Another source of power is information. Do you have information they don't? Or nowadays, we have so much access to information. Our problem isn't getting information, it's sorting through it and curating what is the important information we need and how do we communicate that information. Another form of power is association. So that could be like a co-op or a union. That's in terms of numbers. Sometimes this can also mean, who do you know? That, though, is considered kind of an underhanded use of power in a negotiation where you say, do you know who I am, or do you know who I know? So we don't generally do that now, but having lots of people on your side, that's what we think of this as co-ops and unions. But if you have none of these, if you have no other power, you can always increase your preparation and your influence over the process. In other words, how the negotiation itself goes. So is it going to be respectful? Is it going to be that we're prepared? Are we going to take our time to think through some options and try to, come to an agreement that works really well for both of us? That's your influence over the process. Sometimes people try to influence the process in a negative way. They want to rush you. They want to, you to buy what they want to sell you, those kinds of things. But knowing that also gives you more power, being able to see that happen. I'll give you an example of where influence over the process made a difference. Went to buy a car with my husband, who did careful research. And we went on a Saturday at the end of the month, which I realize is not a good time. It's the only time I could free up. It's not a good time because if it's month end, salespeople are trying to make their numbers. And so when we got there, the salesperson told us that the car we wanted had been sold, and that we would have to look at another car that was very similar. So we did look at the other car. We were almost ready to buy it. But one of the things I've learned is most people need to take a moment to really think it through and think, okay, is this my only option? Is this a good option for me still? It's changed since I came into the negotiations, so maybe I should ask that question. So we went for a food break, which is another really good thing to do. Never a good idea to negotiate on an empty stomach. And as we're on our food break, we thought about, that's funny that when we left the house, the car wasn't for sale, but when we got here 20 minutes later, it's gone. So we actually took a walk in the parking lot of the dealership and the car was still there. So for some reason, the sales lady didn't want to sell it to us. And I think it's probably because she was told to get some other car off the lot or whatever. And of course, the second car was a little pricier. So knowing that and being able to slow down that process and take a moment to think, we decided that we were not going to buy that car because we didn't like the idea that we'd actually been lied to. So we went and got the car at a different dealership, and we're very happy. So that's an example of where, you think you have no power against, a cable company or the real estate agent or the car dealership, but actually you may. They're assuming you have no training. And as of now, you're going to have a little bit more than maybe even what they have. So part of the reason that power can be frustrating to us is because maybe we're not sure how we are trying to settle our negotiation. So if we start at the bottom of this triangle, what's in my best interest and what's in your best interest? Really, it's in my best interest to get a car I'm happy with, that's reliable, and to have a good relationship with a dealer that I trust. It is in the dealer's best interest to have a good relationship with a customer that's going to come back over and over again and get their car serviced and so on. That kind of a deal lasts the longest because it works for you and it works for me. It's not surprising, though. A lot of times people don't know what's in their best interests. So they'll say, I want to give you $20,000 for that car, but they're not really sure why they're setting that price. They just think they're supposed to be tough in the negotiation. But then that may move you to this rights negotiation. Is that the right price for that car? You can argue back and forth. It's this or it's that. It's right or it's wrong. The problem with right-wrong negotiating is that somebody wins and somebody loses, which if you want to have an ongoing relationship is not conducive. This may only work if you're going to do a one-time negotiation. In one of my classes, I had a car dealer who actually said that, you know, he would just continue to press someone until they bought the car. And he was very proud of how tough he was. And then one of the people in the class asked him, does anyone ever come back? Do you have any repeat customers? And he had no answer for that. So something to think about when you're looking at the relationship. And in business, you know, if we cannot reach an agreement, usually it goes up a level. So maybe it goes to the VP level or whatever. Does a VP have the power to make a decision? Yes, they do. Is it going to make everyone happy? Not necessarily. So again, that's why we hope to settle most of our disputes or negotiations at the interest-based level. So does that make sense so far? Any questions? Feel free to put something in the chat or unmute if you feel brave. Okay, and it's not speak now or forever hold your peace. I'll keep monitoring the chat. Okay, so how do we achieve a balanced approach? Unfortunately, Hollywood has made it sound like negotiators all have to be aggressive and tough and have, you know, and depending if it's a Hollywood movie, it seems to always end in a gunfight or a fist fight. But actually, in the majority of negotiations that people like us do at work, at home, in our volunteer lives, at school, we sometimes are having what feels more like a conversation if it's someone we know and the negotiation works for us and it works for you. So for example, I need the window open in the office, you need it closed. If we have a good working relationship, we can easily negotiate that we switch places or that one of us gets a sweater or whatever. There's lots of solutions to that. But if we don't have a good relationship and we try to push our outcome, the outcome that we want, then that's when we start to get into trouble. So does emotional intelligence matter in negotiating? Absolutely. You'd be surprised at how much emotional factors matter in negotiating. For example, we find that virtual negotiations take longer than in-person negotiation, and we're not as happy with the outcome of virtual negotiations, even if the numbers are the same. And part of that has to do with trust and relationships and how much body language we can see. So we find that the negotiator that's more likable can actually get better outcomes because they're easier to deal with. It seems common sense, and yet in the world of negotiating, it's something we have to think about. I think we've been for years seen this, you know, you have to be really tough. And sometimes you do have to be very firm about what you need out of the negotiation, but it's not about being aggressive. It's more about being assertive. So what traits are problematic for negotiators? Complaining is problematic. So opening a negotiation with a complaint about the room or the food or whatever usually sets a very poor tone. Any kind of manipulation. So as I mentioned to you in that negotiation I told you about at the beginning, anything you try to do that is manipulative, and if people find out now or later, it produces a backlash. So you know, we will never go to that dealership again. And I don't know how many of you are in customer service, but 9 out of 10 people will tell another 9 or 10 people if they're unhappy with a business. And somebody like me may end up telling a couple hundred every year. So interesting, I don't know if people knew this, cooperative or win-win negotiators are successful 59% of the time, while adversarial competitive negotiators are successful in only 9% of their negotiations. So for those of you that were looking for a win-win and you're not seeing it on the other side, keep this in mind. Ideally, we don't want to be in that kind of a negotiation. Sometimes we have no choice, but I'm going to suggest a few things to do ahead of time so you don't find yourself in that situation. So preparing for a negotiation, get as much key objective information ahead of time as you can. Market value, costs, efficiency. This applies in business-to-business negotiations as well. The key difference I find in business-to-business is that you're often negotiating in a team environment, and they are as well. So that makes it more complex, and it also means you can't do necessarily what you would have wanted to do. So the guidance for people negotiating in teams is never surprise your teammates in the room. Always call a break and talk to them first, and keep your stakeholders, your boss or whoever that is, keep them well informed of what's going on. Make sure they're not surprised by anything. So these are some of the pieces of information you can gather ahead of time. Even if you're looking at a salary negotiation, you want to look at market value for your skill set. There's a lot more of that information available now. You just ask Bing and Chat GPT, and AI will come up with a summary for you. If you're going to use AI, ask for references and check the references. Otherwise, it may make things up. So, okay. So to feel more confident, what you can influence is your mindset, your skills, which you can improve or at least be fully aware of what your strengths are. And the benefit of being in a team environment is you may not be good at one thing, but your teammates might be great. So maybe you're good at the relationships and your teammate is a math whiz. That's a great matchup. Your preparation, looking at that information that I talked to you about earlier, and also thinking about what information would be useful to them. Should you know that as well, if possible? You may not know everything about what they need, but the more you can think about ahead of time, the more confident you'll be in the room. Practice. I've absolutely practiced myself. I've practiced with other people. A good beginning goes a long way. And what I often find is very helpful is a friendly greeting and a good open-ended question. Something like, what is the most important thing to you in this negotiation? What would a good outcome look like for you? Something like that. And I have a few suggestions. So practicing is really important because our brain triggers anxiety when we're doing things we're not familiar with. We have some fear of the outcome, and you guys gave some great reasons about why negotiation can be tense and conflictual. So our brain wants to protect us from that. That's why we don't want to do it. But practicing helps your brain get more familiar with what it is you're going to do. And it just makes it easier because it comes to you more quickly when you're actually in the room. So a quick check before going in, what is my mindset? What is the optimal mindset? So let's say I'm feeling reluctant, I'm dragging my feet. This is not where I want to be, but is this the optimal mindset to go into this negotiation? What would be the optimal mindset? Maybe it would be open, it would be curious, it would be prepared, it would be, clear on what my own interests are and willing to consider what their interests are. So what do I need to move myself to that mindset? Maybe I need a walk. Maybe I need some practice. Maybe I need to call a friend. There might be some things I need to do. Maybe I need to do a dry run with my team or work through it with my boss. So there are the factors to prepare, but here's actually some steps to follow in a negotiation. And if you think this through with reference to a negotiation that you've been through recently or as long ago as you can remember, you probably have done these very steps. And that's how we got this model. My partner and I, we interviewed our clients, we watched the progress of their negotiations, and we found that they generally followed steps like this, clarified what they were interested in, made a plan for how they were going to, especially with business to business, you probably would have several meetings, depending how complex the negotiations. And then we hopefully create some good options to choose from. And then we agree on a couple of options and we implement an agreement. Sounds simple, right? Well, you might have to cycle back a couple times. And the real leverage here is taking some time to clarify, what do we really need? Remembering our earlier statistic that many people will not have had negotiating training. And I mentioned to you, particularly if they don't have training, they may not know what they need most from the negotiation. You have to clarify that maybe for the other side as well. So for example, one of my clients had a really good employee show up in his office, seeming annoyed and wanting a 2 pay grade raise. Now, I don't know how it is at your companies, you can put in the chat, but 2 pay grade raise in this particular organization had to go to the CEO. So the manager wanted to just say, no, that's crazy. We can't do a 2 pay grade raise. On these economic times, what are you thinking? But why is somebody asking for 2 pay grades when they clearly know that that's not the process? What else could be motivating someone to ask for a raise? So is it the money? Maybe. What else? So I'm going to challenge you to put in the chat, what else could be motivating someone to ask for a raise? What are some other things? Maybe they don't feel valued, recognition, workload, unhappy with job, workload, perceived unfairness with another colleague. They have been headhunted by another company. Yeah, change in life situations, overwhelmed, underappreciated. You know, yes, you're all correct in a way. The role had changed and there was a much higher administrative component, which meant this person had to stay late and they couldn't get home till late, which meant that the spouse couldn't go to work. And so they were unhappy both at home and at work because of the change made by the organization and didn't really know how to express that. And this is how it came out. Yes, they could be considering another role. That sometimes happens, but it was really more the recognition, workload, and feeling overwhelmed. Realizing that they are the need of the company. Yes, just ask them why it's important to them. Absolutely. Yeah, it seems basic, but a lot of times people don't. So spending a little bit more time on this clarify step is really helpful. And that's where there's some leverage. There's some magic there to figure out, oh, okay, you need that and I need this. We can make it work. A plan would be, how do we make this go efficiently? Do we meet at your office, my office? Do we meet somewhere neutral? Who do we need in the room to help us with information or capturing data or whatever is needed? And then deliberately build in a step to create some options. So I'm going to show you a couple things. Let's look a little bit at positions versus interests. These are negotiating terms. And positions are, this is the outcome I want. I want this car for $20,000. The interests are what's motivating me. Why? I need a reliable car to get to work. I only have a budget of $20,000. I don't want to spend 3 days negotiating, etc. And issues might be things I agree to, like how many miles on the car or kilometers, color of the car, whatever, right? Those are the issues. So let me give you an example from my negotiating practice, my own consulting. I had a client that I have had a great working relationship with since 2008, and every year we would recontract. And I was thinking for myself as an independent vendor, I would feel more stability if I had a 2-year contract. And my interest there is to create some certainty, but my suggestion, my position was a 2-year contract. So the issue we're working on is the length of the contract. Well, I asked my client, how would she feel about that? You know, just, I didn't put it out as I want this. I said, what would you think if we did this? And it turns out it really met an interest of hers because the procurement process at her company was really long and complicated. And she said, let's just do a 5-year agreement. That was great. That met both of our interests really well. So hopefully that interest issues positions helps. And we do, in the full day course that I do, we spend a little bit more time on this, this concept, because it's really important. Often people will state the position first. I will give you X raise. I will give you Z project, whatever it is. And we react to that. We think, yes, no, what should I do? But the why, the reasons that are motivating us sometimes don't come out. And that's where the power is, for sure. Okay, here's another term you need if you come away from a workshop. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So have alternatives ready. That's one of the things you research ahead of time. So if this car dealership doesn't sell me a car or I don't like the terms they're offering, what's my next best choice? Can I go down the road to another car dealership? Or is it going to be difficult for me because I can only buy this particular car? So how easy or difficult it is for you to walk away. That gives you power if it's easy for you to walk away. So that's an important thing to know, and we go into more detail with that as well. Planning who's going to be there. You know, do you need your boss at the final for signing? Do you need the boss in at every meeting? You know, who else is going to be in the room? Where will we meet? All of that stuff is not wasted time. It's particularly in business negotiations, it's getting to know the other parties. You know, this is how we start to build the relationship. You might be surprised, and maybe some of you already know that during the Vietnam War, it took 8 months just to figure out the size and shape of the negotiating table. And this had to do with cultural differences, with differences in how different countries negotiated. And that time was not wasted because, again, people got to know each other as people. And I find that if we care about the relationship, we get to know each other as people, we are more motivated to work towards a win-win outcome. So to create some options, you want to maybe try some brainstorming with your side to offer the other party 1, 2, maybe 3 different options. Nothing too complicated, but just to see if there's a way to make this work even better. So for example, my negotiating partner, he has been at the same car dealership for 15 years. And the first year he went there, he leased a car and he negotiated 5 years of free oil changes. So if you think about that, why would the dealership agree to that? Anybody want to put something in the chat? Why would the dealership say, yeah, sure, we'll give you five years of free oil changes? What's in the dealership's interest? Why would they be motivated to do that? 5-year lease, continued relationship, keeps the customer coming back. Yes. Sell additional cars, trust, happy customer, loyalty. Yes, yes. Continue to see you and upsell. Exactly. Because what are you doing while your oil's getting changed? You're looking in the showroom. So now my partner's on his 3rd car from that dealership. And if you think what an oil change costs, it's not that much, but keeping you as a customer is a huge strategic advantage. Okay, sometimes the way to get really great ideas is to involve somebody who's completely uninvolved, and they can give you a really different perspective and come at it from a different way. So that can give you some good options too. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about this film clip we're going to show you, and then Donna's going to show it. Many of you may have seen Michael Scott in The Office. I have his method of negotiation here in quotes. Here's the context you need to know about this negotiation because, you know, it's a little unusual. The context is that Michael Scott has just opened his own paper company. His former employer, Dunder Mifflin, is losing many customers to Michael. Previously, Michael's branch of Dunder Mifflin had been by far its most profitable branch. So he's taken over this branch. The customers are staying with him. They're choosing to stay with him and not with Dunder Mifflin. He is with his team on this side, and he's negotiating with the team from Dunder Mifflin, the chief financial officer, and Charles, who used to be their boss at Dunder Mifflin. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions after this, so keep an eye on this film, and hopefully all the technology goes well and it works. I will stop sharing and let Donna share. Okay, so I've got a couple questions for you on how that went. Okay, what goes well in this negotiation? Just put in the chat what you think goes well. And here's some options to consider. Do you think they were prepared? Did they research? Did they understand their own interests and the other side's interests? Or is there anything else you noticed? What went well? See what's in the chat here. Understanding of consequences. There you go. For the other side. So he understands the consequences for the other side. He knew what the other side would be worried about. Surprise factor. Yeah, that did surprise them for sure. I wouldn't generally advise doing that because that may undermine trust. They did understand their and the other side's interests. They got what they wanted. Yes, they did. They knew how desperate the other side was. Notice the other side was using the strategy of bluffing. So let's see, research of the board meeting. Yeah. They understand their own interests. He takes the time to consult with the team. Well, he does consult with them, but he ad-libs in the room a little bit, and they say to him, discuss these things with us. Not settling for less and the consequences of losing for the other side. Sustainable, practical solution. Good point, right? Okay, so what could this team do better next time? Let me know in the chat what you think they could improve on. Oh, Michael's confidence, rejecting offers outright puts it in a position of power. Yes, absolutely. Prep with the team beforehand. Yes, that would have even increased that confident kind of presentation. Communication on their side, be on the same page. Yes. And if you are not on the same page, it's wisest to call for a break as soon as you can and not let that show. So preparation, interrupting the other party, more detailed scenarios ahead of time. Go through the situations and responses. That's Great advice, absolutely. Michael nailed his own interest, but didn't fully address what Dunder Mifflin might see as a win beyond stopping their client loss. Excellent point, Claudia, that's great, thank you. Okay, check your tone of voice, demanding versus collaborative. Yes, yeah. So although in this situation, he does get what he wants and he is fairly demanding, there is a consequence for being that demanding. So if he has an ongoing relationship with the CFO, I would suspect it's going to be challenging after this. Okay, so now unity, keeping options A and B. Yeah. Professional insults might not always land well. Correct. I've seen that not work very well. Even what someone might think is a joke can backfire if there's some tension in the room. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that small clip, which I'm happy to say didn't end in guns or anything like that. So what are the skills you really need to refine for negotiating? Absolutely figuring out how you going to listen as well as you can, even if you or especially if you actively disagree. Paraphrase to show you understand. And, if that's not comfortable for you and you feel like it's too techniquey, you don't have to do that. But that shows the other side that you're hearing them, you're understanding, you're picking up the nuances. Acknowledge feelings probably doesn't go over very well in a workplace environment or a negotiation. It can be as simple though as, oh yes, that sounds frustrating. And then the person will tell you, it's not just frustrating, it's a pain in the neck. Like the example I gave with my client and their contracting process. If at all possible, when you're listening, avoid giving advice. I don't know if you noticed in the Michael Scott negotiation that the CFO said, you're in debt, you're probably scared, this is the best you're going to get. So basically telling them what they should do and advising them. That can really backfire. I had a real estate agent say to me when I was selling my house, he walked around the house and you can't see my body language, but he had his hands behind his back and he was looking, and this was in quite some time ago, and he looks up and he goes, yeah, those windows are going to have to be replaced. Like he's talking to my agent, right? Not even talking to me. And he looks up the kitchen cabinets. Oh, that kitchen is so 90s, that kind of thing. And I had done my homework. I knew what the house was worth. I knew we weren't pressured to sell it right then. And he was being condescending. And that to me was annoying. And if those of you that have trouble with assertiveness, sometimes if your values are violated, you can find that assertiveness pretty quickly. And so I said to my agent, I don't want to deal with him. He's been talking down to me, telling me what I need to do to sell the house. He's not my agent. Anyway, it turns out I said I wouldn't sell it to him. He made me an offer that was $25,000 too low. So I just turned him down flat. I said I didn't want to negotiate with him. And my agent said, why? He'll come up. But I knew already this was not a good process. And this is how a bad process can undermine potentially a good negotiation. If you're rude to the other party, condescending, giving advice, not listening, they won't want necessarily to deal with you because there may be somebody else, another buyer who is easy to deal with and wants this house. So that's why the process is important, and the listening and how you do it can really make things go better. Having some good questions handy is really helpful. And my colleague, George Campbell, who was my boss at one time, thought of it like a diagram. You ask open-ended questions to open and clarify what it is people are needing, what's motivating them, what's most important to them. Do they have 3 things they want out of this negotiation, but one is a showstopper if they don't get it? Or do they have 3 things in this order? Or are there some nice to haves we could throw in to make it a better deal? So coming prepared with a few really good questions always helps the process of the negotiation. But if you have conflict, how do we disagree constructively? So one thing is to emphasize what we already agree on. So we agree that this is a good house for you. We agree that the garage is the right size. Here's where we have a challenge. So then you emphasize your areas of agreement. Here's where we have a challenge. You want to pay cash at the end of July. It's mid-June now. I understand you want to do that. I'm having trouble understanding how that's a benefit and what that does for my risk. So this was actually an actual transaction that we had. So check assumptions. You know, I'm assuming I put my house on sale in June, assuming that it's near a school. People would want to buy in June and close in August and get their kids settled before school starts. But maybe that's not their motivation at all. As it happened, the house that I was buying, their main concern was, could they take some cuttings from the garden, right? So it just depends on the deal, what the assumptions are. And be as careful as you as possibly can not to blame, because it makes people feel defensive, and then the collaboration just decreases. So a really important phrase to take away if you feel like there are concerns. So for example, let's say the other side came late and you're sitting there annoyed, and then you don't get an agreement. It might be tempting to say, well, you know, coming late is a problem for us, or something like that, and that won't help. What you might say is, there are many contributing factors, and instead of blame, contributing factors. And then you can ask them, what can we do to make this negotiation go better? I have a comment in the chat here. I'm fortunate to be able to reject working with problem clients. I learned they sometimes come at a cost. Yes, I couldn't agree more. In one negotiation, one of the, he was a vice president of an engineering services company. He shared their model, which was like a triangle. And he said they divided their customers into A, B, C, D. A customers, they worked with really well. The customers found value from them. It was profitable. Things went well. B customers, still value, still went well, just not as well as the A. C customers, they would break even. So this is work you would want to do during a downturn to keep your people's skills up to date and so on. And D customers were customers that were so hard to deal with, they cost you money. And the idea was not to have those D customers, if at all possible. So thanks, Angelica. That was a great contribution. So here's I'm sharing with you some of the stock questions and phrases. Just having these on hand is really useful. And over the years of doing my course, I've had people tell me that this was a really valuable slide. In fact, one of them said to me, just show me that at 9 o'clock. That's all I need. And then I can go. So here you can have it at the webinar. Tell me more about your perspective. Help me understand how this meets your needs. Here's a way to answer this difficult question. Is that your bottom line? You don't have to answer every question you're asked. You can say, given what we've discussed, I believe we made a fair offer. Because if you say, and put your answer in the chat here, if you say, yes, that's my bottom line, what happens? Or if you say, no, that's not my bottom line, what happens? So put your answer in the chat. You say, yes, it's my bottom line. Well, if you say yes, that's it. You really can't move beyond that. It could be kind of a lose-lose, yes. Closing discussion, yes. So if you say, I believe we've made a fair offer, that's an assertive way to say, I'm actually not going to change that offer. So now your side has to think about, what do you want to do about that? Here's my way of disagreeing. I understand the rationale up till now. It's at this point I have trouble. So I take the accountability that I don't see how this, meets the needs. And this works. People will explain it to you. And then you usually find out something else you didn't know. That's why that's important to you. Oh, so you need it by the end of the month. That's why. Okay. And then this is supposed to be an ear. I don't know if it looks like an ear. But asking the question and then giving enough time to answer. Those of you that are more extroverted, how long do you think the average extrovert gives people before they answer their own question? You can put your answer in the chat. So how long? Extrovert asks a question before they answer it themselves. 3 seconds. Yeah, it's 2 to 7 seconds. Yeah. So the coaching that I got, which really helped quality of discussion, is count to 30 in your head after you've asked a question. Give people time to process the question and collect their thoughts. And after I was given that advice, the first time I counted to 30, it felt honestly like 5,000, and discussion quality improved. People didn't feel as rushed. And if people feel rushed, that's another process thing. They can start wondering, okay, why? Why are you pushing me so much? Stock questions and phrases and negotiating process. These are some things I had for you. One question we had at the beginning in the chat was what to do about objections. what I would suggest is try to find what those objections might be even before the negotiation is started. There's a suggestion in the chat about Michael and his team could have run some scenarios. That helps you, like just pretend you're the other side, play it out. And that gets your brain going on. What are they going to think at this moment? What are they going to ask now? What will they need so that they can trust us? So those are really good things to do to clarify. And ideally, you would have way less in the way of objections later. If you do get an objection, really listen to it and see if you can understand it and if there's a way to work with that. You might even need to take a break and go back and consult with your stakeholders, but ideally strive to prevent those objections from coming up. Does that, for anyone who asked that question, I hope that is helpful. Okay, so this is what I had for you today as a summary, and then I'm going to ask you what your takeaways were. So preparation, research, analysis, and information. I kind of feel like 80% of the work has to be done almost before you get in a room, right? Okay, so know the interests of the other party, know what the market will bear, know your power base. So Michael kind of intuitively knew his power base, but it would have been better if he had been able to articulate that with his team ahead of time. Strengthen your listening and questioning skills, be aware of your impact in the negotiating room, practice, and then try to find ways that what you need links with what they need to get that win-win, if possible. Not always possible, but ideally you want to do that. If you have a difficult or challenging personality that cannot see or cannot seem to orient towards a win-win, then you might want to re-examine, is there another way to get what I need in a different negotiation? Can we ask the other side to switch out a party? There's ways to work around the difficult person. It's not necessarily a feature of negotiating. A lot of negotiations are collaborative. And as we showed you earlier, those are the ones with the best chance of success. So let me ask you, what would you want to incorporate into your negotiating? What would you take away as a good takeaway? What might you stop doing? And what are you already doing that you might want to continue? This is our way of getting some reflection going. And I would be delighted if you could put a few things in the chat to say what are your takeaways. So a comment from Larissa, she's wondering if it's possible to get a copy of the slides. Do we have people's contact information?
We can definitely talk to our marketing department and probably send a round of emails with the presentation.
Okay, or alternatively, people can contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Okay, so a couple of other questions. Continue lots of preparation, more preparation, yes. Start scenario planning from the other perspective. Before heading into a negotiation, align everyone on the primary and alternative requests. Keep favorable outcomes in mind. Okay, excellent. Prep more active listening and count till 30. Access to the recording, I guess, with same answer, Donna. Walking away from a negotiation is a viable option. Yes. Yeah, I have a colleague who was treated so badly in a negotiation and he really needed the money that would come out of it and left because it just was such a red light for the rest of the relationship. Start assessing my power base and the interest values of the other parties. What do they need out of this? Yes. More consideration with BATNA. Identify positions and interests at the start. Start with open-ended questions. Yeah, great. I joined late in the session, but my takeaway is definitely confidence and how well you carry yourself, i.e. Michael went into that negotiation acting like he had $1 million in the bank, when in reality, his company was on life support. Sometimes it's all about how you carry yourself. Yes, yes. If you think you have power, you might be right. If you think you don't, and that shows. Go in thinking you have power, assess your power base. I'd incorporate the 30-second wait for an answer. Continue collaboration, start more listening, count to 30 after a question, stop giving advice. Thank you. Excellent. Start negotiating for a win-win. Start with preparation, stop narrowing down options, continue finding out pleasure and pain points. Yeah, good point. Consider what is my worst case so I know what I can't go below. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for this. Thank you. Don't make assumptions about the people you're negotiating with. Remember to ask. Inform the other party before that I respond to your question. I need 1 minute to think before responding. Yeah, that's a good idea, right? Because then it calms everybody down. They know what's coming next. Preparation, mindset, active listening. Stop being pushy. Thanks, Evangeline. Stop thinking the other side has more knowledge and skills. Yes, absolutely. Continue being calm and considerate. Absolutely. You know, win-win negotiation is consistent with your person. You bring your personal values to every negotiation you're in, whether it's for your employer or for yourself. And if your values are being calm and considerate, then that's important. They carry over. Collaborative focus. Thank you, Nadine. Can we have a copy of the slides? Yes. Preparation, practice, and remember to have a follow-up. Excellent point. Okay. Okay, so that's what we have for you today. The lunch hour is just about over. I will be here for a few more minutes for questions, and I do see a question here from my personal mentors. Do you want to unmute and share your question? No, maybe I misunderstood that. Okay, asking open-ended questions. I'd like to share an anecdote about how I remediated a huge mistake I made with a client. The story is too long though. Thanks, Angelica. Actually, great work, because sometimes when we make a mistake, that's the opportunity for service recovery. Okay, my personal mentors, you have your hand up again. Would you like to? Oh, you can't unmute.
Nadine, because this webinar is being recorded, it is recommended that anybody would use the chat in order to ask questions.
Okay. Would you be okay to use the chat then? And, okay, thanks. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, and for those of you that haven't left yet, here's our code to give us feedback. The next full day online course is December 6th that we will be offering. And I'm still monitoring the chat. We'll be on for a few more minutes if you have more questions, because I know it takes a little while to type things in the chat. Okay, well, thanks everyone. For those of you that have to drop off, thank you for participating. I appreciated the really lively discussion in the chat and enjoyed hearing from you. Thank you all.
As Nadine mentioned, if you could download the QR code and do the surveys, just has 5 questions, just to get your feedback on this webinar, to see what other webinars you'd like to see us present in the future. So thank you for attending and have a wonderful day.